Hey guys, kinggath here, and in this guide we're going to go over the special buildings such as the Armory, Training Yard, and Mess Hall. So in total at the time of this recording, there are actually 8 different special building types, all of them either being martial or recreational. Now in the future, we will definitely expand the different types. We may go beyond martial and recreational, though not likely. We really like those types as the plot types to use because it forces you to make an important decision that whether you want to provide a resource for your soldiers or one of these new abilities. So the resources being the wages, rations, equipment, and beds, which come from the other 4 plot types. And then these serve their unique purposes depending on these special buildings you can use. Now, these special buildings I'm going to show you are always on 2x2 plots for Conqueror by default, but add-on packs can add these to any of the other types. So for martial, there's also 1x1 in interior, and for recreational, there's also interior. So if an add-on pack has added one of these special types to that plot type, you can use it. But if you just have Conqueror installed, you don't have any add-on packs, or none of your add-on packs add any of these special buildings, then just know you should build 2x2 plots. But these special types are similar to the way there's certain commercial types. So if you think about the commercial, that there's the armor store, the weapons store, etc. With this, we added that special subtype system to martial and recreational. Now, currently, there's no great way to display this in the UI that's quick and efficient, so I'm going to show you the method we have available to us to show you what type you're about to get. So if you go to the ASAM sensor on any martial or recreational plot and go to choose building plan, you'll get your list of plans. And for the Conqueror ones, we tried to name them something obvious for what it would be, that it would follow the type of special building, but not all of them are like that, and not a lot of the add-on packs are like that because it would become very boring to look at the names. And there's also a limited text amount of space we have in here, so there's no great way for us to display this. Ideally, we would have custom icons there, but that's not possible in the base game. It does require mods to do anything like that. So currently, the way we've opted to do it is if you go to select a particular building that sounds like it might be the type you want, you'll get confirmation on this screen. So you can see here it says Armory. When used in an outpost, automatically arms your troops with gear to match the rank. Now we'll talk more about the gearing because there are some controls you have over that. But I wanted to start by showing you this with the Armory because it's the same for any of the different types. So we have the Battlefield Scavenger, again, comes up and it explains there. And you can see in the brackets, the little name there, I've asked all of the add-on pack authors when they're creating one of these special types to follow suit and do that, to at least, if they don't have to necessarily include the whole explanation, but I've asked them to at least include in the brackets the subtype it is so that you guys know that you're going to gain that particular benefit from that if you use that building plan. So these special buildings are effectively just the specific building plans tagged to add that special ability. So we'll go over the different abilities now, but I wanted to show you guys how to identify those since add-on packs can add more than just the ones that ship with Conqueror. So the first type, and I think the one that most of you guys are going to be interested in, is the Armory. Now this is a martial type, and the Armory will automatically equip your soldiers. Now there are some balance issues with that. Obviously, some of you might be concerned with. Another is some of you are probably concerned that you don't want your soldiers to be automatically equipped. So I'm going to show you guys how to toggle and turn off these options and play around with that. But before I do, let's talk about how this works in general. So the basic idea behind the Armory is that as long as your equipment is full, so long as your equipment score is all the way there, which mine is not right now, and my HUD just there's my HUD again. My equipment score is not quite full. So right now my Armory is effectively useless. It's not doing anything. And there are a couple of special buildings that use the other types as well. So it's a good idea in general to keep your faction resources topped off to make sure that all of your special buildings are functioning. So first thing to know, Armory requires that your equipment score is full before it will function. The next thing to know about it is that in order to trigger the equipment, one of 3 things has to happen. First up is when a new soldier is recruited, they will automatically be given gear for their initial rank. Now, generally, that's just automatically the case because of the way people have set up the NPCs in their faction packs. But if they didn't, if they have the NPCs set up one way and then the Armory providing them an upgrade, then you might see them change their equipment immediately if they're recruited into an outpost that has an Armory. So there is a benefit to putting an Armory inside of every outpost. In fact, that's another thing to mention about these, is whenever we talk about the benefits provided by these different buildings, they tend to only apply to the NPCs that live in those particular outposts. So all of these extra benefits that I'm going to describe, they only apply to the NPCs that live in them. There are a couple of exceptions, but for the most part, it's based on that. So there's a reason for you to create these in every single outpost, but not necessarily, and you'll have to make that determination. This is part of the strategy of how you lay things out, of how you determine, do I have enough freedom? Do I have enough extra resources being provided by vassals where I can spam a lot of these bonus buildings inside of my outposts, etc. You'll have to make that determination. That's part of the fun. So with the armory, that's one way, is the initial recruitment. The other way is to start an assault. As soon as you start an assault, everybody who's part of that assault, if their home base has an armory, they will get equipped. And then the third way is something we haven't talked about in this series yet, but if you make them a personal guard, any of your personal guards will equip the appropriate ranked equipment as soon as you walk into an outpost with an armory. So you'll get a little message in the corner that says your personal guards used the armory to equip. And of course, that still follows the rules of you having to have a high enough equipment score in order to maintain equipment and get them upgraded. So the other thing about the equipment is that it is rank based. So when you get your guys to rank 2, 3, 4, 5, they will upgrade their equipment, assuming that the faction pack configured that. So as far as I know, all faction packs do have equipment configured, but go ahead and read the faction pack page to determine if that's the case. The other thing to note is that they aren't necessarily uniforms. While I think some of the faction packs have opted for uniforms, it doesn't always make sense. So for something like the Super Mutants or the Raiders that are included with Conqueror, they generally don't follow a specific exact set of equipment that everybody has, but instead there'll be tiers of equipment. For example, with the Raiders, we did things like the early guys just will have maybe just a shoulder piece, and then as they rank up, they'll add more pieces, and it's randomized between the different sets you'd expect from the Raiders. So it's kind of they will tend to have more equipment, more armor, or a heavier set of weapons, but it's not always going to be the exact same thing. Whereas I think something like the Brotherhood of Steel faction pack has gone for more uniform type, which makes sense for their design. So keep that in mind. It won't necessarily be everybody in the exact same armory outfit. It could be just that the types of equipment are changed over time. Now, the things I talked about earlier were some of you guys might want this feature off, and you can do so. You can still have armories and turn parts of it off. So if you go into the Conqueror mod configuration section or in the holotape under the Conqueror section, if you look under there's a special section for armory, you can change it to only equip certain things. So there's a couple of things to know about this outside of the what I just mentioned about armory equipping their stuff, is that once an armory hits level 2, it can now start distributing weapons, and you can disable that. So if you don't want, just say if you only want the armor, you could leave just that on, or if you want the weapons, you can add that on. Once an armory hits level 3, it does something very special, which is before every single battle, so before you start any assault, it will add them extra things like grenades and stim packs. Now, this is up to the actual faction packs to determine, but I think in my explanation guides in the faction leaders toolkit, I think I suggested they do things like giving every NPC a grenade or two and a stim pack to make sure that they're more resilient and more powerful in combat. So every time you start an assault and take your squad, that squad will each get this extra equipment, assuming their home armory is level 3. So if you don't like the sound of any of these particular features, you can turn them off individually or all of them. But obviously, if you turn all of them off, then the armory doesn't serve much of a purpose. So you then don't want armories anyway. Another thing you can do is in an individual soldier level. So if you decided, you know what, I'm going to equip my squad out myself. Oh, thank you. I'm going to equip out my squad myself. I don't want the armory overriding any equipment. On this menu, you can actually turn it off. So you can see on this guy, I've already turned off the armory, so his equipment will never be upgraded, no matter what. But this guy, I left it on. It's on by default on everybody. So if you equip a guy and you want to make sure that their equipment that you handed them doesn't get changed, turn off the armory setting on them if you are using an armory. All right, so that covers the armory. Let's go on to what I think is probably the second most powerful in these plots, and that is the training yard. So ours is called the shooting range, I believe. Let's see here. Let's look at this plot type. Yep, it's called the shooting range. If we go into our choose building plan, I'll show you what that looks like on the little card that pops up. So shooting range. So it will say training yard. And what the training yard does is it allows your soldiers to get up to rank 3 without having to ever see any actual combat. So they can safely get up to rank 3 without you having to risk their lives, because while there's no attacks going on, so when there's no incoming raids from enemies and you're not taking them out on an assault, while they're just sitting in your settlement, they are protected, which means that only you, the player, can kill them. They can't be killed by random mobs that run around. They can't be killed by vanilla raids. Only the Conqueror specific controlled raids are they killable, or if you take them out as a personal guard. So the training yard is a fantastic tool to get your guys all ranked up. Now, there are some rules on how it works. First up, it will always work on ranking up whoever's assigned to it. So whatever soldier is working that, regardless of what their role is, they will slowly gain experience toward their next rank. Beyond that, the only people that benefit this are warriors. So you can put a training yard inside an outpost, and all of your warriors in that outpost, so as long as they are not configured as soldiers or workers or patrols, they will also benefit from the training yard, and they will slowly gain progress toward their next rank up to a max of rank 3. And again, you can check the progress up at the top there. So he's only at 1% right now, but you can check that. And the training yard is probably the most efficient way to get your guys up to rank 3, because you don't have to do anything else other than leave them as warrior role. So again, very, very powerful plot to have. So the training yard is one of 3 ways you can rank soldiers up. I've covered that extensively in another video, so if you want to learn more about rank ups, go check that out. But the training yard is a great way to do it. I almost forgot to mention something about the training yard, and this applies across the board. Is each of these plots, these special buildings, as they rank up, they have a more pronounced effect. So with the Armory, we mentioned that they start equipping them with armor at level 1, then level 2 they add weapons to that as well. Level 3 they started adding secondary items. With the training yard, it speeds up the progress of, or it speeds up the training, so it'll happen more quickly. Next up, we have the mess hall, and this is another recreational, so I'll go ahead and show you guys what that looks like. I think ours is actually just called mess hall, but this type basically provides benefits to any of the soldiers when they go on an assault. This is something some people have requested this be added into the personal guard system as well. We will be adding that in the future patch, just not there now. But currently what this does is the mess hall, depending on how high the level of the mess hall, before you or once you start a raid, any soldiers whose home outpost have a mess hall in them will gain a random buff. It can be things like extra damage, extra speed, extra fire resistance. There's all sorts of different buffs. It chooses one randomly and gives it to your entire squad. And there's also a possibility in the future, another feature that has been requested is being able to customize the buff, and that might be something we do. But just know mess hall adds random little buffs that will add combat bonuses to all of the soldiers that go on those assaults. Then if we head back over to our martial plot here, we have the Battlefield Scavenger. This is one of the few types that actually is beneficial to put in vassals and outposts. And what the Battlefield Scavengers does is it automatically loots enemies for you. So after you run an assault, whether it be you attacking them or if you are attacked by a raid, at the end of it, as soon as you leave the area, so as soon as you leave and the cell unloads, normally in the game, the enemies would all be deleted and any equipment you didn't grab would be lost. But if you have a Battlefield Scavenger, instead, all of that equipment excuse me, will be deposited in your workbench. So this is a great way to ensure that you get all of the loot from those bodies without having to spend a lot of time personally doing it, because if you've played much Conqueror, you know there are a lot of dead bodies. Now this one is one of those ones where it's kind of like the lazy man's friend. If you're not lazy, you're probably you might want to avoid this one just for the sake of gaining the benefit, but that's not exactly true, because at levels 2 and 3 of the Battlefield Scavenger, it actually starts finding extra equipment that you can't find yourself. So for each body, it will kind of roll a chance in the background of finding additional things like grenades, stimpaks, and chems. So you can actually gain a benefit from Battlefield Scavengers, even if you're the type of person who likes to loot every single corpse and you don't worry about the game doing it for you. You're happy to go click on every single piece of loot. You can still gain a benefit from having Battlefield Scavengers. Now, some feature requests that have come in for this building type that are on my list to implement in the future are automatically donating those resources to the donation system in some settlements, which if you want to read about that, check out the Rise of the Commonwealth in-depth series guide that has the donation system covered there. Another suggestion people have had put out there, which we're still looking into because it has a lot of balance issue potential, is taking that equipment and applying it as a temporary buff to the equipment score. That might be something we do, but again, there's a lot of balance issues with that. So currently its only purpose is to loot equipment and provide extra bonus chance at things like at consumables from various enemies that die either attacking or when you attacked those particular settlements or outposts. All right, next up is the final type that's available to recreational, and that is the cemetery type. And this is a unique one in that it's the only one that actually has a potential benefit even in a normal settlement outside of the happiness boost provided from recreational plots. But first thing to know about this is that for Conquerors, this is one of the few that doesn't have the type name as the building plan name. This is actually called Funeral Pyre, but if you look in there, you can see the subtype of cemetery. And so the morale and happiness is the impact of deaths is reduced. So let's talk about that. So in the background of Conqueror, whenever a raid or assault happens, so whenever you get attacked or you go to attack, there's a little kind of a score calculated in the background. It basically determines what are your odds of success based on the strength and number of your warriors and guards versus the strength and number of the attacking NPCs or defending NPCs on an assault. And based on your odds of success, if you greatly defeat those odds, then you'll get a great morale boost. If you fail at those odds miserably, then you will get a big morale penalty. And the cemetery reduces the impact of that penalty. So if you are finding yourself on the receiving end of some attacks where you're losing a lot of soldiers and your morale just keeps tanking, your happiness keeps tanking, the cemetery is your answer. That will help prevent that. So this is especially useful to have in your main base, since even if you have all of your control scores under control, your main base is still eligible to be attacked at any given time. So it's a good idea to have one of these there to reduce the overall impact of that. But it can also be useful to put in some of your to put in any of your external outposts that you anticipate having soldiers at that might die, just because, so some of your lower level guys, maybe obviously your legends aren't going to die, but the wherever the home base for that soldier is, if they die, that outpost is going to take a hit to its morale if they lose that soldier. And the penalty will be larger if the odds were in your favor. So if you took them into a battle that you easily should have won and you lost anyway, that the impact will be greater. And so the cemetery is a way to combat that mechanic. Now, I mentioned that this could have a benefit in settlements in some niche cases. So there's a built-in mechanic into the base game that if a settler dies, you actually get a happiness penalty for quite a while. I think it's 7 days in game, something like that, where you'll get like a -20 to your happiness, which can be pretty nasty, especially if you are doing things like city plans where you want them to upgrade over time, and your happiness is a big factor in that. So the cemetery actually reduces that penalty as well. And the higher level of cemetery, the greater reduction of the penalty it will have both in outposts and normal settlements. Now, the reason I said that for normal settlements is that's pretty niche, is because by default, settlers can only be killed if you, the player, walk up and shoot them. And usually if you do that, all those other settlers will turn on you as well. So then the happiness penalty is the least of your concern. But there is a small group of you who use the mod or a similar mod that make your settler. The mod is called Mortal Settlers is the one I'm generally thinking of, but I think there's a couple other mods that do it. But if your settlers are made mortal, they can die from all sorts of things. They can die from walking off of a high service. They can die from random NPCs spawning in and attacking. They can die from vanilla raids, etc. So if you're one of those players, then these cemeteries become useful across the board, not just in your outposts. All right, then right behind me, we have the Field Hospital. This is another one related to deaths. So this one is another martial type, and I'll show you ours. I believe ours is called Field Hospital, so nice and easy to find the Conqueror one. But the Field Hospital is used you should have these in the outposts if you're experiencing a lot of death and you're trying to keep your guys alive to make them get up to that higher rank. So the higher level the field hospital, the higher chance that instead of dying, your soldier will just be put into the bleed out position. So basically, if you have a field hospital at the home outpost of a soldier during an assault and they were supposed to die, instead there's a chance, and again the chance goes higher the higher level your field hospital, there's a chance that they will survive instead to fight in another battle. So this is a really, really powerful thing to have if you're trying to rank up soldiers, especially through assaults and not just through the training yard and personal guard system. So if you're looking to rank up through assaults, which is actually the quickest way to rank up, field hospital is going to be your friend. All right, next up we have the prison. So the prison is going to be a favorite of those of you who like to play with the captive system because it's going to generate a lot of captives for you. So the way this works is by default you won't have anyone in there. I actually force spawned that one just for the sake of this demonstration. But when you have a prison, which first off it's called the POW lockup in Conqueror, but prison is the type. So POW lockup is the default Conqueror martial plot design. And the prison basically after a raid, so when you get attacked or when you make an assault on a settlement, which is less like, I guess that wouldn't be it. That would almost never happen. I'm trying to think of a circumstance where that would make sense. So basically when people attack you, so this is especially useful in your main base if you have all your control set up. But if you have a prison type set up and you get attacked, at the end of that attack, you will take prisoners. So some number you'll find of the attackers will end up in your prison, and they are now captives. And if you walk up to a captive, you'll see a put to work option. So if you hit put to work, you will be given an option to send them as a captive worker to any of your outposts or vassals for that faction, and they will function under the normal captive rules, which I just put out a guide on that, on how those work. So they're effectively cheap labor. So you can go up to put to work and put them in there. The number of captives that you can have is determined by a couple of things. One is the level of the prison. Another is, I believe there are commander traits that increase the number, but it caps out at a certain number. So you'll want to periodically come back and put them to work in order to capture additional ones. So it will only capture as many as the slots it has available, which is by default tied to the level. So 1 at level 1, 2 at level 2, 3 at level 3 of the prison. All right, the last type we have is another martial. So note that I changed this plot type to a martial. The last type here is the Recruitment Center. This is the simplest one to explain. The Recruitment Center increases the max number of daily recruits you can gain. It actually it has a % chance, but when the building hits level 3, the % chance is 100%. So you can have one of these per outpost. So if you have 10 outposts with level 3 recruitment centers, you can get up to 15 additional recruits per day instead of just 5. So recruitment centers are super, super useful if you want to mass recruit in bulk every day. So if you are trying to grow your army very quickly, or if you just had a terrible loss and you need to regain real fast and the 5 a day is too slow for you, the recruitment center is your answer to that. And again, just remind you that this is a martial type. Every other portion of this video, the plot in this spot was a recreational. So I think that covers all of the special types currently. If we add additional, I'll make another video to add on explaining those types. But know that the idea behind these special types is to make it a more difficult decision about what you put inside of your settlements. None of these are really required, although the Armory is pretty important to the gameplay of Conqueror. Outside of that, none of these are really required. They just add you more interesting ways to play. But in addition to that, they're all designed to make your outposts feel like outposts. So it gives you a lot of reason to put tons of military or war-themed buildings in your outposts, as opposed to just building them to look like a normal settlement. So we wanted to give you lots of different options to do that. And same with the reason that the recreational plots are a great one for warriors to work on, since they won't automatically be converted over to guards. So again, between those, you've got now 8 different building types to add to your normal collection of plots you might design, so that you can make sure that you're not only do you have benefits from them, but that also you just have this look and feel in your outposts that is substantially different from typical settlements.
you.